This is the 18th season of Bass Talk Live. With your host, Matt Pangrath. BTL is brought to you by Lowrance, Bass Cat Boats, APCO, Strike King Lures, Sunline, Big Bite Baits, Spro, X-Zone Lures, Gamakatsu, The Bass Tank, Denali Rods, and Pro Guide Batteries.
PTL, coming at you!
Good morning and welcome to another exciting edition of BTL Bass Talk Live, where we are going to talk about bass fishing. Recorded show this week, working on getting everything to where we can do stuff live on location very shortly, which I'm excited for, but I'm currently at the Red River, hopefully not stuck on a sandbar or stump or lodged on a wing dam. All three of those are very likely possibilities. But I thought I wanted to get on. The pro circuit just wrapped up. There were some big announcements coming last week from MLF about the I guess morphing, transformation. I don't want to say it's like new, but it's gone from the FLW Tour to the Tackle Warehouse Pro Circuit, and now it is the MLF Invitationals. And I thought, man, who would be a good veteran angler who's been through it all? I think he was even there. He might have started in 2000. It might have been the heyday where they had the fanny packs on the guys with the battery packs and the boom mics and like he's shaking his head. No, I guess that was pre Matt Stefan, who is our guest today. It's the third time that you've been on BTL this year, becoming a BTL regular. Always enjoy our conversations with Matt Stefan and his mental coach, too, Katie Gruber, who was on last time. But, Matt, I thought it would be a very timely time to get you on BTL, 12-year veteran of the FLW Tour MLF Pro Circuit. And I also thought you had a very interesting year this year. You might have some reflections that our listeners and viewers can learn from. What's up, dude?
Hey, Matt, thanks for having me on. It's been a wild last couple of weeks with all of the different news. You know how the sport is, man. It's like the off season happens and it's rumorville. And you always know right before the actual news comes out, it's like I'm getting 5 or 6 calls from guys. What do you think? What are you hearing? And it just, it's a stressful period because you don't know and you hear everything. Like in this case with the news with MLF, some guys are like, well, they said it's gone. They're taking it away completely. Other people are like, no, nothing's changing. Plus they're adding 4 tournaments and there's going to be championships. You never really know, but
all over the board.
Yeah. So it's a stressful time period where, you want to be dealing with off-season stuff, your sponsors and getting boats and all that. But it's hard to do any of that when you don't even know what's happening. Right. So, yeah. I can't say I was super pleased with the meeting.
We'll get into that. We'll get into that later. I mentioned you were shaking your head. No, you were not for the... Do you remember that FLW period where it was all crazy camera angles? They had the boat that had the big boom camera on it that hung over the side of the boat, and then the guys had to wear the fanny packs with the 6-pound battery cases in it and fish, and it was like a whole production on the water.
Yeah, I was right after that. I got to the point where they started putting camera guys right in the boat. But yeah, this was my 12th season, so I've seen a lot of change. And unfortunately, I can't sit here and say that I've ever had one off season where either, entry fees went down and payouts went up, or payouts went up with legitimately something that really truly excited me. So I'm kind of fearful for the sport as a whole. And I know MLF in this case will probably say, well, they lowered entry fees, but that's a lot of that's based on last year. They said they raised entry fees, specifically the $5,000 for us to cover live coverage all 4 days. And then they cut the tournaments down to 3 days this year. Or for next year. So it's one of those things where they technically reduced entry fees, but it was based on a raise from last year that wasn't even payout related.
A lot of logistics going on. Fishing is an interesting professional fishing, let's say the top level of professional fishing is interesting because if you take like let's take the big sports like football, basketball, like, okay, there'll be some like rule tweaks, right? Like they might take the 2-line pass out of hockey to open it up more, or put the trapezoid deal behind the net so the goalies can't go out and play the pucks. They added a 3-point line in basketball a long time ago. They changed the rules a little bit in football as far as targeting or how many feet you have to have in. But as a whole, it's like, you know what the season is, you know how many games it is. It has not changed over the course of time. Dude, fishing has changed a lot and morphs a lot and continues to change a lot. I mean, it's impressive. You know, the Elite Series started in 2006. This was the 16th, 15th, 16th year of the Elite Series, called the Elite Series under kind of the same format. Now, they've had little changes as far as majors and how you qualify and postseason stuff. But that 16-year span is like by far in the 50 to 60-year history of this tournament sport the most stable it's been. Yep. Everything else around it, I mean, you're talking invitationals, top 150s. You look at how the FLW Tour has done things with zeroing weights and cutting and brackets and name changes. This thing changes and morphs, it seems, every 2 to 10 years on all the different circuits. It's just interesting to me how and then you take the MLF and the BPT, and that totally changed the game. It's weird how many changes there are over a short amount of time. You think that's just because the sport's new, or do you think it's because we haven't found the right mix yet, or what do you think the reasoning is behind that, Matt?
You know, I think it's all business, right? So what all the organizations are trying to do is set themselves up for very good future prospects. And the reality is, right now, the sport is a tough place to grow. And I think a lot of it has to do with our audience is only hardcore tournament bass fishermen. And it's not. I just had this conversation the other day with Kyle Cordiana, and you know, we don't have a sport where you have like a city behind it, right? So, you know, I grew up in Chicago. We had the Cubs. The Cubs were always the lovable losers. If you were a diehard Cubs fan, you watched the game. Yeah. But I'll tell you what, when the Cubs are good, that city is crazy, and you have 10 million new Cubs fans because the Cubs are doing good. We don't have that in fishing. Like, you know, when somebody goes on a heater and you get like Kevin Van Dam back in the days when he was just winning everything, that was probably when you start getting the most, you know, that was an example of like somebody who got a lot of attention, but it's nowhere near like when a city gets behind a team. So I have, like, for me, I think the hardest part with our sport right now is we're trying to position the sport to build a new audience. The problem is our audience is already watching. You know, we're the hardcore bass fishermen, the tournament bass fishermen watch everything, whether it's MLF, bass, NPFL, we watch it all because that's what we love to do. But it's, in my opinion, it's really hard to grow a new audience for people that don't watch fishing that much. And I know like MLF will point to their numbers and say, hey, we've been growing a bigger audience. The problem is I don't know that you can grow a big enough audience fast enough to see a strong enough rise in incomes to really support a tournament trail to like some glorious new level. Like that's the issue that I'm seeing. And I think a lot of the change that we're seeing in the sport, you know, like I started, it was the FLW Tour, and then we changed to the pro circuit, and now we're changing to the Invitational. So there's a lot of change. And I think a lot of that has to do with trying to figure out new ways to appeal to a bigger, wider audience. I just don't see how it's going to happen with this. I mean, you know, we can point to TV and say, yeah, we're going to shoot for having as much TV as possible. Mm-hmm. But as far as I'm aware, the TV is a dying audience as well. Everyone is going to streaming and, you know, Apple TV and stuff like that. And therefore, there aren't as many viewers on CBS or Fox as there used to be. So that's kind of you're trying to create a new audience on a dying platform as well.
That is a great point, Matt, because I haven't thought about that. I cannot remember the last time that I just sat down and watched a show, a 45-minute, an hour-long show. Does Bass even do that anymore? Do they even have like an hour show, or is it just the live on FS1?
I honestly
can't remember the last time. That used to be the deal.
And the thing is, Matt, I can't even watch it because I don't have cable at my house. I have Apple TV, and I can get most of what I want. You know, if I want to watch
Hmm.
movies, I can get Netflix and all that. But so I'm as much as I would watch those shows, I'm not even one that would fall into the audience that would watch it because I don't get those channels.
Neither am I,
So
because if it's on FS1, I have to watch
yeah,
the live mix
so
because I
it's
do the
just
same thing. I do the
yeah,
Hulu and
yep. So
yeah,
it's hard to generate new fans and create that audience. You know, MLF's always been, we need to create more views. The more views we get, the more sponsor dollars we can get. But you're trying to create a new audience in a dying platform as it is. I just see a lot of hurdles. Like I said, in my 12 years, it's been it's been frustrating because I want to start the year excited. You know, I
yeah.
want to be like, man, there's these new prizes this year. The payouts are pumped up. And every year it's like, well, I'm paying more to play for less. And
Yeah.
it's becoming harder and harder.
I think you saw that a little bit in the Toyotas last year, the last couple years when they announced the reduction in entry fees, the
Hmm.
crazy payout at the championship, and I think you saw a lot of people flock to the Toyotas because they were excited about what that it was. Hey, you pay less and get more. In
Yeah.
one of the rare side, and you were seeing 250 to 300 boats right off the hopper in a lot of those prominent area Toyota series. I think that was a result of positivity of listening to the anglers more.
Yeah. I think that's I think we need more of that is what it comes down
Yeah.
to. We need more of that at all levels.
So I started out by talking about the changes on it, and it's interesting. You think those changes are more, or don't think those changes are driven by business decisions for bottom line dollars, because I mean MLF, Bass, MPFL, for profit organizations. They're not like nonprofit organizations. They're there to make money. You think that's what those decisions are made of, more so than listening to what the anglers want and the anglers' well being? Because it also seems like over the past 4 or 5 years, there's been emphasis behind the scenes at the professional level of, hey, listening to the anglers. But I also think some of that might be out of a necessity of having to listen to the anglers because their hand has been forced.
Yeah, it's a little of both. I mean, there's a lot of emphasis on what's the angler input, but the reality is they're running a for-profit business, and if it they give us the changes that don't affect the bottom line. Let's put it that way. So if there's, say, a rule change or something that we want, or increase off limits, things like that, we have a good argument on. But when it comes to the bottom line adjustments, we really have had very little say in that. And I'm not saying that we necessarily should. It's their business. I'm running a business. I have the right
Mm-hmm.
to choose to fish or not fish. But what we need to find is common ground where both businesses can work together and thrive together.
That's a
And we don't have that
delicate.
right now.
It's a delicate balance.
Yeah.
Because on the other hand, then I don't know if I've ever explicitly stated this, but in order to create the change, I think you have to have everybody on board with it, right? To where they're like, hey, you have to force it. Hey, we have to do this. Like I said, we saw the changes that Bass made when MLF was formed and the BPT, and they were like,
Yeah.
hey, all this stuff, we're seeing it in the golf world right now with Live Golf or the PGA. Like none of this stuff at the PGA would have been happening without Live. Just broad examples that force it. But then on the other hand, at the top level, you have the most influential anglers in the industry who are thriving, who are making money, who are fine with it. And there's really no incentive for them. You know, they've worked their butts off. They've gotten there. They've won. They've got it. They've got the sponsorship. They're making the money. There's no incentive for them to scale back and force the change with the rest of the anglers in the field because they've reached the pinnacle and earned that
Yeah.
right to be up there. Is that a fair? You see what I'm saying there?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, if you're talking about Bass doesn't necessarily have the owner or the angler ownership. With MLF, they've got the angler
Yeah.
ownership, and there's definitely a lot of decisions that are made to support the anglers that are in the BPT, and a lot of those anglers are owners. A lot of them have earned the right to be there. Every one of them has earned the right to be there, and I think the question comes down to if the anglers that are not there, anglers like myself who are fishing the old pro circuit or the Toyotas or even the Opens, there's a lot of us that are really hungry to get to the next level. And when you continue to change the rules and make it harder to get to the next level, at some point, I don't want to chase the carrot that's in front of my face, or I'll go chase a different carrot, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there needs to be some recognition that, hey, if you guys want to protect the anglers at the top level of say BPT, that's great. You can do that, but you need to recognize that you're also potentially hurting your future by not bringing in some fresh faces, some people that have brand as well. I mean, it was made very clear to us by MLF brass over the last couple of years that they will do everything they can to protect the anglers with the strongest brand. Well, there's a lot of anglers outside of BPT that have pretty strong brands that I think could bring value. And if you're shunning them, they'll take the value somewhere else. So, you need to find a good ground that invites the anglers to want to fish to make it to BPT. And, with the changes they've had, I don't know what the overall feel is, other than it's pretty negative so far. But give it another couple weeks and maybe it'll kind of that sour taste will kind of dissipate.
All right, you're a business guy. We've talked about that, especially the first time you were on about your background, numbers, money. You don't do things that don't make sense. You chase the carrot as long as it makes financial sense, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Let's get into some of these changes. And I talked about it in a show last week where I just went over the nuts and bolts, objectively, some of the changes. I would say the most notable change, or the one that's the most glaring for the invitationals in 2023, is the elimination of the former FLW Championship or Forestwood Cup or MLF title, whatever you want to call it. Thing's been around for almost 30 years, rich history in it. I think Thrift won the last one before it changed to the title. And then we've seen, Spencer Shuffield just won the title, and Jimmy Washam the year before that. Well, going into 2023, that's gone. There is no automatic payout for $10,000. I believe 48 anglers made it to the title the last couple years. It was the reward for the hard work. It was basically your Bassmaster Classic for the FLW Tour MLF Pro Circuit. The winner of each event in 2023 will now go directly to Redcrest, $300,000 guaranteed payout. Great event there, but that's only 6 anglers plus the angler of the year. So 7 anglers out of the 150 field now get to move on to a championship event. The rest, 6 events, and you're done. As an angler who has made 7 of these titles and earned over $60,000, over $70,000. Hell, you made $100,000 just in the titles alone. It's at the end of the year in the summer. Great boost. How big is that elimination for you, and how much does that hurt you as an angler not to have that to look forward to or to strive to in 2023?
I mean, it's the biggest change they could make, in my opinion. I mean, that single event. I think if you talk to anglers in any of the so-called professional level circuits, that event is kind of your make and break for the year. If you qualify for that, you've probably had a decent year, but therefore, then you've got an additional minimum $10,000 thrown on your plate with very little expenses because there's no entry fee. So that's the biggest change that they could make, in my opinion, because now all of a sudden it turns us into a true qualification league where you're not fishing for anything. And it's going to change for the anglers that choose to still fish. It's going to change your process a little bit, right? You're no longer going to make that change, that adjustment maybe at the end of the day to try to secure a limit just to save some points. You're only fishing to win these events, and there's nothing more to them at that point. So it's
a great point.
I mean, as an example to lay out the stats here, I mean, so it's $5,000 entry fees, 6 events. You're looking at $30,000 in entry fees. With the way costs are right now, with lodging and gas and, a few other basic necessity expenses like fishing licenses and maybe a little bit of tackle, you're looking at close to $2,000 a tournament in expenses. So $4,200 or $42,000 to fish 6 events. Well, with the change in payouts as well, if you cash 6 top 50s and get an $8,000 check, you've cleared $48,000 in winnings if you have from 31st to 50th, which are great finishes. I mean, that's a really good finish, but at that point you're basically fishing to break even. So, the reality is you're going to need to cash in every event to make any money fishing without a championship. And, at that level and the caliber of fishermen that are fishing, it's a difficult thing to do.
I think something like 6% of guys cash in every event or less than that.
Yeah. I mean, if you go back and look last year, I want to say there were 30 anglers. I could have my number wrong, but it was roughly 30 anglers that won 50,000 or more last year, including the championship in the pro circuit. So that means there were roughly 130 guys that probably broke even or lost money fishing. And that's
it's interesting you mentioned that it changes the way you fish, because it is you cover this in the whole second half of the season. It's so-and-so needs 2 strong finishes to make the title or to make the classic, or you go into the final day and you guys do completely build their season around, depending on how important it is to them. But, a lot of the guys build their season around making sure they are in that title event. You're a great example of this. He finished 73rd this year, which is uncharacteristic for you. I mean, you've had Angler of the Year finishes at 30th, 11th, 41st, 27th, 30th going forward, but still every day this year you caught a limit. And you go back to your 2021 season, you're 25 days in a row catching a 5 bass limit out of 25 days that you could be on the water. Now that does you a lot of good. Like I said, you've made $78,000 in the title events over it because you catch that limit, you give yourself an opportunity. And even in those titles in the Forest Wood Cups, you've had a lot of top 15 finishes to where something little bit goes right and it's a career-changing event. That's all out the window now. Like now that limit doesn't do you much good anymore.
Yeah, it really doesn't. I mean, it's one of those things where you're either fishing to win the event to make the red crest, or you want to be in the top 8 to qualify to move up to BPT. But that the being in the top 8 is similar to trying to go through the opens to make the elites. You got to have a killer season. Like you can't have one of those, I'm just going to try to save my event and salvage a limit. You're going to have, I don't know, 6 top 30s, 6 top 40s for sure, with nothing below that to make the top 8. And that's not to say, I mean, and then they mix in the BPT anglers can still come and fish. And if they end up having a good year and coming in the top 8, there's one less spot that could get rolled down on. So, and maybe I'm wrong on that. I don't know if they've said whether if a BPT angler takes one of the top 8 spots, if they'll roll down to the next.
They haven't before the last couple of years.
My assumption is they won't, because they've never done it before. But yeah, it changes things. I mean, like you said, I've always been a very consistent angler. And one of the things that after my first 3 years on tour, I sat down, went through the stats, and looked at what I did wrong, because I finished in the middle of the pack my first 3 years. And all I needed to do was secure a limit with the smallest size fish any of the days I did not catch a limit, and I would have been right at the Forest Wood cutoff line for that. So since then, I've always kind of recognized the importance of trying to secure a limit. And then this year we ended up just fishing unbelievable fisheries where it's hard not to catch a limit, I guess. But generally speaking, if you catch a limit every tournament day that you fish, you're going to make the championship. And in this case, I don't know if I'll need to change my fishing style to fish, to really swing for the fence, so to say, or what. But there was really no reason to fish for points at this point. Yeah.
Let's go through the payout a little bit too, because this is an interesting thing. And it's interesting. Some of the guys at the top, I know, like, a check is a bonus to them. They give it to their wives, and they fish there, and it is. But for meat and potatoes, for the guys who make a living at this, who have a family, they get the sponsorship that maybe covers their expenses, but then their profit is in those $10,000 checks, or even those $5,000 checks. Because I hear a lot of people say, oh, well, you finish 75th, you get a $5,000 check, you don't even make your money back. But if you have your expenses covered, and you have sponsors that cover your entry fees, and you've got $45,000, $50,000 in sponsorship, and you bust your tail, that $5,000, that's like all your expenses for 2 months. That's big.
Yeah.
That is not just, oh, I got part of my entry fee back. That's profit for you, for a number of those guys that are out there that have been around a long time. I want to take your 2022 season, and this is a perfect example of it. You did $20,000 this year. You cashed a 45th place, $10,000 check, but then you also had a 73rd at Pickwick and a 59th at Champlain. Narrowly missed it at Gunnersville with a 78th, but $20,000. Under the new payout structure, same field size, you'd have done $8,000 this year.
Yeah.
You would have cashed one $8,000 check.
Yeah, it's it you know, I look at the year and it's so funny, you know, that was a year. This year I felt like I fished better than I have ever at the professional level from a decision-making standpoint, and the results just don't show it because of some lost fish and just I didn't get the big bite in a lot of instances. But like the thing is, there were 2 fish that I lost that had I caught them, I would have qualified for the championship and I would have won more money in those events. So
I want to get into that in the next segment. That's the next segment. We got to save that because I'm all about good fish stories.
Well, all I'm saying in this case, though, is that's how close I am to, or I was to cashing, to having a decent year. But with the new format, I don't know that either of those fish would even mattered that much because there's no championship I would have qualified for. And yeah, maybe I would have bumped up and cashed an $8,000 check in one of them. But in the other one, I already cashed a $5,000 check, so it wouldn't have done me that much difference. But that's how our sport is already so narrowly defined by your successes and failures that, you know, anytime there's a little bit of money taken off the plate, and in this case, it's a lot of money. I mean, we're fishing for almost an 80% payback at this point. So, you know, for them to take 80% or 20% of my $30,000 is I'm paying a $6,000 membership to fish with them. Like that's a pretty hefty fee. So when you take that away, and my tournament performance is, you know, if you have a bad event, you're really walking away sour after these.
Yeah, it was last year. Almost a little over $6 million in the pot for the 6 events. Granted, there was an $833 increase. There's $5,833, but they paid back $1 million per event. They're paying back $750,000 per, or there's $750,000 entry fees going into 2023. They're paying back $650,000. And then if you've got a Phoenix, you're golden. If you win an event, you still get the $115,000, but it's like only $80,000 if you don't run a Phoenix for the win. So they also chop some of the win. Yeah, it's interesting. It's very interesting.
You know, I recognize that they're making changes based on their business model, but at some point, you know, I personally, like, I almost feel like it would have been a better business decision, and maybe they discussed this, just to take the additional resources that were put into the pro circuit, roll them into the Toyotas, make the Toyotas just a killer circuit, right? Where maybe they have good payouts for AOI, maybe they pump up their already great $200,000 championship. You pull your BPT anglers from there. And that sucks for guys like me who might then have to drop down to the Toyotas. But it's one of those things where right now the Toyotas might actually be a better option to begin with, because you're fishing for more with a championship and you're fishing with a lot less risk on the plate in terms of the entry fees.
Yeah, the invitationals or pro circuit, it's kind of stuck in this weird no man's land right now, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's another concern, is we've seen it kind of slowly washing away the last couple of years. And the reality of it is, I don't know that it's going to be there in another year or 2 years. So if you decide to fish, are you just kind of waiting for the inevitable? And I think that's a realistic possibility. You know, when MLF bought FLW, it was rumored that they wanted to get rid of the pro circuit or the tour at that point to begin with, and there was sponsor dollars that were brought in that kind of convinced them to keep us around. So then they rebranded us as the best 5-fish circuit, you know, and tried to push that, and that hasn't seemed to go over well. So common sense tells me they're going to revert back to what was rumored to originally have been the case, which was to get rid of the FLW tour / pro circuit. So I think it's only coming. I think it's only a matter of time at this point. You know, they've told us it's not been profitable, and in this case, we're picking up the difference to make it profitable. And, I don't know how the anglers are going to continue to want to support them.
It's interesting stuff, Matt. All right, let's get into some fun stuff. Maybe maybe not fun. Let's get into some educational stuff. I always like how you always break things down, some educational stuff. I want to take a break, and when we come back, I want to look at your year. I want to look at how you analyze a year. Everybody gets done with their season, whether it's a BFL, whether it's a club tournament. Your goal is to always get better. Your goal is to always start that next year as a better angler than you were the year before. And I know you've got to be one of those guys, as a numbers guy, as an analytic guy, who does that. So when you start 2023, you learn from some things in 2022 or figure out what happened in 2022 to make 2023 better. Let's get into that when we get back. It's BTL with Matt Stefan from his immaculately organized tackle room.
It's not that organized.
It looks fantastic, though. I'm always jealous of it. I mean, look at all those plastics. You got all the boxes. You got the stuff hanging. It's very impressive. All right, BTL. We'll be back right after this.
Your key to better fishing this season is Elite FS, now available at a new lower price. Get Elite FS 9 today for $9.99, and we'll throw in a CMAP reveal chart, our premium mapping solution, for free. Elite FS works with all state-of-the-art Lowrance sonar, from chirp, side scan, and down scan imaging with fish reveal to high-resolution active target live sonar. Elite FS9 and CMAP reveal. Offer ends August 31st.
The new Puma STS has been redesigned from the ground up. With the angler, design, function, and performance in mind, nothing on this new offering was compromised, and the only thing carried over from the previous version is the name. Based on the Soft Touch series hull that started with the flagship Jaguar, this new model is nimble and performs incredibly well at all speeds with either a 250 or 300 horsepower engine. Featuring a new 96-inch wide-body footprint, this hull measures out at 20 foot 7 inches in length. Industry-leading design coupled with tournament-winning performance. The Puma STS from Basscat. Feel the rush.
We're just about ready to go, ladies and gentlemen. Get in order.
Once again, Drew Cook is in the driver's seat.
When you're catching fish for a living, you can't let a little cold, rain, heat, humidity, or anything else get in the way of a payday. I wear APCO. Any fish, any water.
The KVD 100 jerkbait. 15 different colors. A perfect combination of roll, wiggle, and flash. Increased castability. 3D eyes. Premium black nickel hooks. KVD. Tie one on. Striking lures.
Elite Series Pro Daryl Gleason here. My Pro Guide batteries keep me going on those long tournament days and long practice days. Always plenty of juice, never fail. The best part about Pro Guide batteries, it's the people behind the company. They have over 40 years experience in the battery business, keeping all of us fishermen out on the water longer, catching more fish. Check them out at ProGuideBatteries.com.
What's up, Bass Talk Live fans? Brandon Polnick here. And ever since I won a couple Bassmaster Elite Series events on X-Zone Lures, I've been getting a bunch of questions of what makes them so special and different. And really, the truth is, it's in the details. The little details, things like no cheap fillers in their plastic. That gives you more lifelike action, more realistic and vibrant colors. But don't just take my word for it. Go to www.xzonelures.com and check them out for yourself.
Welcome back. BTL with Matt Stefan talking about some changes in the fishing industry. Take a snapshot right now, Matt, of the landscape of professional bass fishing. Just take everything into account. All tours, payouts, championships, everything that's going on right now. Take that picture, frame it, put it on the wall. In 3 years, you take the same picture, snapshot of what the industry looks like, tours, everything, and you hang it next to that picture that you took today. Are those photographs recognizable at all? Are they similar at all? Do you think we'll have a totally different looking landscape in 3 years, 3 short years?
I think everything looks the same except for the invitational series are either changed to something else or completely removed. So I don't see any changes. I don't see any changes for bass really. I don't see any other true changes within 3 years for MLF other than the removal of the invitationals.
Does not seem to bode well for the invitationals in the near future.
Dude, the 12 years I fished the FLW Tour / Pro Circuit / Invitationals have always been the ones I feel like it doesn't look good for. Except for bass. There was one little hiccup for bass, and they're back rolling just fine.
Yeah. What would you say the heyday for FLW was if you were to pick like a little 5-year span? Because it seemed to me like there were some years where, yeah, it wasn't bass, but dude, they were like rolling over there for a number of years. Like it was awesome.
Yeah. Mid 2000s to that mid 2000s range. I want to say there were like 73 anglers on the, what at the time was the FLW team deals. So they were getting like entry fees and stipends and all kinds of stuff. They had their opens as well as their regular series events, and the opens, I think maybe it wasn't the opens. There might've been a different name to it, but they had some that were paying like double the payout. So it was 200. These are regular season events that were paying $200,000. Like the last place check was like 15,000. When I talked to some fellow Bridgeford pros who were fishing at that time, I mean, it's pretty ridiculous how good the industry was, and a lot has changed. You don't have back then. There really were no other outlets for fishing related companies and non-endemics that wanted to market in the fishing industry to do anything other than to look at the tournament world. And nowadays, the tournaments are only a small part of marketing plans. There's a lot of other ways companies can go, and it's kind of really hurt the tournament world, in my opinion.
Do you think we'll ever see team deals again like we saw in that heyday? Like it was also on the bass side too, like the Crown Royal, the Team Crown Royals, and the Purelators, and I know we still have like some Team Toyota stuff going on, but like those team deals were something crazy. You think they were good for the industry? Do you think they were good for the anglers, or do you think it was like a weird period that we'll never go back to that again?
No, I think it depends on the company. I mean, Bridgeford Foods, we consider a team.
Yeah, you guys have one of the few team too.
But it's not like we're a team where we're out there working together trying to share, information, because we're all kind of scattered throughout different circuits to begin with. So it's not really like a team in terms of trying to help each other catch more fish, but it is 100% a team in terms of how do we help Bridgeford do some marketing, with the idea that, if we've got more team members out there doing more stuff, there's just going to be more eyeballs on that Bridgeford logo, which is going to build the impressions and therefore helps build Bridgeford's brand recognition, which is the whole goal. Mm-hmm. So I do think there's very good potential to see companies try to build around a team of anglers like Bridgeford has, because it's been very, very beneficial to Bridgeford. It's been a great program for them. And I do want to say that we'll see that in the future, but from the perspective, like the old team days when FLW would have several people on like the Snickers team or, Kellogg's team or whatever it was, at that point, I don't really see that partaking too much, but it would not surprise me at some point if we see a league pop up where you've got kind of what I was saying before. You've got like a city team. So you could have the Gunnersville Grass Slayers, and they've got a team of 5 guys, and you've got the Chicago Carp Bashers, and they're trapping around, and you try
they
to
have that in the
like,
kayak. I had a guy from the KFL on. They do that.
Really? Well, I think you could see potential of that in the bass fishing world, where you have like 5 angler teams from places fishing against other anglers from other cities and have matches that way. I do think that's a possibility.
I like that. That's interesting. Do you think that takes hold in the next 3 years?
No, I think it's potentially out of ways. I think the sport right now needs to see a lot of consolidation before we see big growth. I don't think there's enough room to grow I'm not even going to say 3 leagues. I'm going to say like six different leagues. You got the Opens, you got the Elites, you've got MPFL, you've got the Invitationals, BPT, and the Toyotas. Those are all bigger circuits that are trying to be promoted as like national level circuits. And I just think you got to see consolidation at some point.
Dude, I'm not going to lie. I've been surprised at the MPFL. And I did not realize there were that many, I guess I would say, anglers willing to have a $5,000 or $6,000 entry fee. They had the good first year, but then I think I kind of put a fork in them. But when all that happened with the championship, and then they're still trying to reorganize, it just didn't look good. And now after this year, it seems like they're back and stronger. They're not dropping guys. They've got a $5,000 entry fee, that they've got 100+ guys going. They're going up next year. They just announced a 6-figure payout for the championship. A lot of interest. It looks like they'll have. I mean, does this surprise you how many guys are out there willing to spend $5,000-$6,000 on an entry fee?
There's a lot.
I don't know where they come from. Where do all these people come from, Matt?
Well, but here's the issue I see with this. Like, just because guys are willing to pay the entry fee doesn't necessarily grow the sport, right? Like, to grow the sport, we want the best talent possible, in my opinion. And there is so much fantastic talent at the local level and the regional level. And these guys they can't afford it. And I don't know how half of us afford it, to be honest, to pay $5,000-$6,000. So just because people are willing to pay $5,000 or $6,000 doesn't bring legitimacy to a tournament circuit, in my opinion. Now, I've heard MPFL is raising the entry fee to $6,000 next year, and their payouts are paying, I think they pay $6,000 to 40th place. And I mean, you're going to have to catch a top 10 in that tournament to make any money. And yes, they have a championship, so that's a positive, but they might have some hurdles with that. And I think MLF took a page out of their playbook, to be honest with you, with respect to the invitationals, by making them invitationals. If they can't fill the field with pro circuit anglers and BPT anglers and Toyota series guys, they're going to open it up and fill that field with anybody that wants to put down the money and come and play. So you're going to get a lot of cherry pickers, that would never get the opportunity. They may, just because they have $5,000 sitting around, they'll go, hey, I'm going to go fish that. So to me, that's not a good thing for the sport, but it's a good thing from a business model because it helps them keep their fields full, and that helps them make the payouts and get the sponsor dollars and all of that. But I really do not feel good about where the stage of the fishing world is right now from a tournament perspective. I think the fishing industry as a whole is in a fantastic place. But if you're only a tournament fisherman right now, and I'm sitting here as somebody who has been able to kind of make the YouTube thing work over the last couple of years, but prior to that, I was pretty much a tournament angler. And I'm really, really glad that I've put the effort into trying to grow a YouTube channel, because I don't know how just somebody who's just a tournament angler is going to be able to make it, because every year it just gets tougher and tougher.
Yeah, I'm just perusing through Angler of the Years and money earnings for the early 2000s for FLW. Yeah. There's like freak show years. There's a couple years where like 3 or 4 guys made over $300,000. Or $500,000. Like, I'm looking at 2004 now, and like 37th place was like Chris McCall, 64K. Like 64, 42, 33, 39, 64, 266,000, 156,000, 519,000, 131,000. Now, granted, they won, but like, that's some life-changing money.
And the entry fees were dramatically less. They were like $3,000 a pop at that point. Plus, the cup was, I think, $1 million for a while. I mean, my first
Scott Suggs, Michael Bennett,
$1 million. Yeah.
And then it was 500,000.
Yeah.
And then I think the Classic went to 300,000, and then
we cut ours to 300, and then we
follow
cut
it
to 200.
And now it's 0.
Yeah. Now we got none.
All right. Let's learn some stuff. Let's use you as a case example to see what we can learn by analyzing our seasons. End of the year, what do you do at the end of every single year to make sure that you are better than next year than you were at the last cast of the previous year?
I mean, I definitely look to see where my weaknesses are and what techniques I need to work on. That's one of the first things I do. I always look back at my decision making to see if there were decisions that I made that may have, it's always hard because it's hindsight, right? So it's
Mhm.
you don't know how it would have played out with a different decision. But the reality is there, like I look back at Lake Champlain, and I had a very, very long shot at qualifying for the championship if I had had like a top 5 in that tournament. And I love chasing smallmouth, but I found I spent a good part of practice looking for largemouth because I'm like, in order to really have a shot at winning, I feel like I'm going to need like a 6-pound largemouth to really pop a big bag. And I found a couple areas in practice where, I mean, I shook off a couple fish that were in that 6-pound class. I had a bunch that were like, I only stuck 2, and they both were like 3.5. So like really
Punching?
nice quality fish. Yeah, yeah. And that's something I love to do. And I was like, I'm gonna see if I can stick a big bag, and then I'll revert back potentially the next day to my smallmouth. And I went, and I don't know what happened. I don't know where they went. I had 2. I fished till 1 o'clock. I only had 2 bites. And I mean, to get bites was not hard. Like when you found a little group, you get 2-3 bites out of a small patch. And, we had a little bit of a wind shift, and we had sunny conditions, which in practice we had cloudy conditions. And I feel like that definitely had a play on it, which normally you would think the sun would help you, but Champlain's kind of reverse sometimes, I found. And the second day, I ended up bringing in, so the last couple hours I went and salvaged my smallmouth. I came in with 14.5, which was like 100th place. I mean, it was not good. And then the next day I said, screw it, I'm going to go have some fun, chase the smallmouth that I found. And I get to my area, and there's like 4 other guys, and everyone had 18 to 20 the first day. And I caught 19 the second day, and everyone else in that area caught 18 to 20. And I mean, we all, like, I just feel like had I showed up there, fished it, I would have had a very good tournament. And
But did you do anything wrong?
no, that's the thing. I mean, I don't think I necessarily did anything wrong, other than if I were to go back, what I would change is it was not that hard to catch, say, 16, 17 pounds
Mhm.
in the area I was in for smallmouth. So if I were to change it, what I would do is go catch like that 17 pounds, and then say, you know what, I'm going to run to the flipping fish to end the day, which is when that bite should be the strongest anyways. And because they're isolated patches, I wouldn't even need to have hit that many probably to determine if that bite was there. But I'd rather be fishing for that 6-pound bite, knowing I've got check caliber fish in the live well already, versus, falling behind the 8 ball, and then you're scrambling and you're not, once I came out of there with 2 fish at like 1 o'clock, and I'm like, I better go looking for smallmouth. And then you start scrambling, and you're just not fishing as good as you necessarily would. So that was a mistake I had on the year. I really feel like as a whole, the year was a good year from a decision standpoint. It felt like every time I made a decision to leave a spot or change a technique, it paid off. The thing is, I just was not catching. It was like, I may have been catching 2-pounders. I'm going to make a move, and I go catch more 2-pounders. Like, it wasn't like I ever was getting that big bite. And then when I look back at it, the 2 biggest bites I had all year, one at Rayburn, where I had a decent tournament, and the other was at Pickwick. They were both 5-pound class fish, and I was flipping for both those. I mean, I stuck them, had them all the way to the boat, and they come up and just do a big head shake by the boat, and the hook just pulls out. And in both those instances, they would have culled me up probably close to 3.5 pounds, somewhere in there, and it would have really moved me up both those standings. So, those 2 fish and the wrong decision to chase largemouth at Champlain cost me a whole pile of points. But I mean, that's fishing. That's how it is. I mean, I could have easily gone to Champlain and caught 20 pounds of largemouth, and I would have felt like, I knew what I was doing.
I've been struggling this year with lost fish. The same thing, same setup that I did last year, particularly on the spinning rod. I'm talking same line, same hook, same rod. I've used it for the last 3 years. The last 2 years, I stick them. I physically remember last year being like, I got him. I'd hook him, they'd come up and jump. And I mean, there was no doubt in my mind I would not lose that fish. I lost like 2 fish last year. I've lost like 7 or 8 this year.
Yeah.
Do you think as an angler, when you lose, and then, you know, you complain to other people about it and they're like, I've had those years. I know what you're going through. It'll turn around. How is that even like a thing? Like, how is some like weird cosmic energy thing? Am I doing something different? It can't just be luck. Like, how does that happen in your opinion?
I mean, I think there's something to be said for getting in a bad rut, that you're not doing anything wrong. It's just a matter of fish were skin hooked and we're able to shake it. But I will tell you something that I've always identified. I feel like when you're losing fish, there's times where you start thinking while you're fighting the fish, I don't want to lose this fish.
100%. I've thought that everyone since the second one.
And every time I start thinking that way, I feel like I lose half of those fish. Like, meaning, like, I don't know if because I'm recognizing it, there's something I'm doing subconsciously to potentially lose the fish. But when I've gotten in ruts where I've lost a ton of fish, and this year I can't say I've lost a ton of fish. I just didn't have the number of big bites I would normally have. And the two biggest bites I had, I lost. And in both those cases, I mean, I had them to the point where I'm like, oh, I got these fish. Like, you know, you've played them out, you've brought them all the way to the boat, and then they come off. So it's one of those things. I do think there is something to be said for the mindset where, you know, if you're thinking those negative thoughts while you're fighting,
you can't mentally lose fish, Matt.
Dude, you can. Hey, I truly believe that you can will things that happen in this world.
You think I'm manifesting losing fish at the side of the boat? Because it's not the hook set. I'm not breaking off. I'm not straightening hooks. I'm getting them. They're getting in, and I'm sitting there going, dear God, please just let me get this thing in this time. This is the tournament. I don't want to have to live with this burned into my brain for the rest of the year as what could have been. Like, all this is going on in my head. So you think I'm manifesting these fish pulling off?
I'm saying I think there is something potentially there where you're doing something subconsciously to lose the fish without even recognizing that you're doing it. Whether it's you're taking tension off the line to go land the fish, there's something there. Let's put it this way. Do you ever think that way in practice or when you're fun fishing?
No.
And how often do you feel like you lose those fish?
I'm always like,
you can't even
maybe
shake them
I
off.
should. I'm like, maybe I should just slowly reel in fish in the tournament because they're always pegged in the top of the head.
Maybe that's something to it. I mean, I think one mistake a lot of anglers make is they do not use small enough hooks. And I truly believe that if you you get more bites with smaller hooks. And as long as you're cognizant of the fact that you've got a light wire, small little hook that, you know, you play the fish out and just let them tire themselves out, that you will land those fish more than you will with a big hook.
Largy, smallies, and spots across the board.
Everything. Doesn't matter.
Treble hook and flipping hook and weightless plastic hook, like hooks across the board. You would rather go smaller than big.
Yeah, you punch smaller hooks in the fish, or smaller holes in the fish's mouth, and at the same time, if you're throwing like finesse stuff, generally speaking, you're going to have lighter line, lighter rods, and at that point, you're putting enough pressure on the fish to keep the hook pegged, but you're not tearing a big hole in that fish's mouth because you can't get that leverage with that light stuff.
Then why does Hackney have a hook that's as big around as my pinky, and KVD puts treble hooks on so big that it's like a wobbling mustad?
I'm just saying. I think overall,
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just curious because those are two.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying you're going to lose fish just because you're using bigger hooks. I'm saying I think there's something to be said for people horsing fish in with hooks that are too big, losing fish.
I see what you're saying.
And I'm not saying you're doing that. I know you're a finesse guy anyway, so the likelihood is you're not doing it. But I do think that there's things that people can change to help limit the number of fish that they're losing. And, you know, if you're using the wrong equipment and you start thinking about, hey, I'm losing fish, then you're manifesting it at the same time. So I think it's a little bit of everything.
I think there's different types of lost fish, Matt. I think there are the only like just gut-wrenching, pointless lost fish where you say, I wish it had never happened, was in the last 20 minutes of the tournament to where it doesn't affect the rest of your day. But I feel like even lost fish can be beneficial fish throughout the course of the day if you treat it like a game, right? Like it changes the course of your day. It depends on how you look at it. Unfortunately for me, I've had the gut-wrenching, holy cow, would have just added 5 pounds to my bag and I weighed in 4 for 9 instead of 5 for 13 and I'm in 130th instead of 20th. But I've really also been, I mean, I think there's something to be said, and I think you're really, with the mental side, and with what we had Katie on before, is taking positives in lost fish early in the day and learning from those.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing to recognize from lost fish is that the majority of them are not angler fault. I mean, there's, you need a lot of things to go right to land a fish. You need to get the hook penetrated through a good part of the fish's mouth. You need a lot of good things to happen. I mean, there's so many times you lose a fish because they swatted at a crankbait or a topwater and you get one hook in the cheek or something. You barely get them, and it's just a function of the game. I mean, you're going to lose fish. I think the ones you can learn from are the ones where you recognize that you did something wrong. I mean, I see it happen a lot of times on the Elite Series still with guys who are top level angler fishermen. I mean, in my opinion, you should never land a fish by grabbing the line. You grab the line, you take the lever, you take all of that potential play out of the rod and you apply straight force to removing that hook out of the fish's mouth. So, I think that's something that can be managed by an angler. But the majority of lost fish, if you're fighting a fish and he comes up and jumps 3 feet out of the air and he shakes the hooks out, I mean, what are you going to do, right? There's not much you could do to maybe try to prevent him from jumping.
Why do you think it is that there are some guys who seem to always lose them and some guys who never lose them? At least with me, with my guys, there's always guys that are like, I should never have landed that fish. And it's like, you've been saying that for 10 years, dude. And then other guys who you're like, did you really have 19 pounds on or did you just catch 7? And then you go out with them and you're like, holy cow, this guy manifests lost fish. Have you noticed that too? There's some guys that are just prone to it.
There's some guys out there that I think it has more to do with the anglers just really like you to know about their lost fish. I think if you talk to almost every angler at the end of a tournament day, a good portion of them, half the field would be like, yeah, I lost these.
Even top level guys. Yeah, even Michael Neal.
The thing is, Michael Neal's good enough to generate an additional 5 bites for every lost fish. So he's just moving forward and catching more fish. It's part of the game. It's something that happens, and I think we dwell on it. I think we dwell on it more from an emotional state where it affects us more than it should in terms of just moving on and recognizing that it was just a fish that jumped and got off, and you're doing something right to generate that strike, so go get another one to bite.
I believe that at the beginning of every year, the fish gods have X number of lost fish. Doesn't matter whether you're fun fishing, pond fishing, tournament fishing, final day of the championship. Every year there are X number of bass that you are going to lose that year. Agreed? It is a finite number. It's not like endless. Like you don't know it. No one knows it, but you are going to lose 5, 6, 7, 15, 23 bass over the course of that year, right? At the end of the year, there's a finite number of bass that you lost. So my thought process is, this is how I get over it. Every time I lose one, that adds to the tally. That's one less bass that I'm going to lose the rest of the year. So if I have 20 or 15 bass that I'm going to lose over the course of the year, I jump 2 off in a pond, I jump 1 off in the Wednesday nighter, and then I lose one with an hour left in the open. Well, now I've only got 14 bass left the entire year, and look how much year I've got ahead of me. That's a lot better.
Yeah, that means you need to fish more tournaments at the end of the year if you've lost a lot of fish in the first part of the year.
Exactly. That's how I justify it in my warped sense.
I mean, it makes sense to me. I'll probably start doing it now. And the problem is I don't know how many I'm starting the year with.
Yeah, but you also could be like, you could get them all out of the way in the first couple and then be good to go. I just remember talking to a guy like, I think Ott on his like rookie year. He won the rookie of the year. He said he caught like all of his fish less than 12 foot deep except one. And he could not remember losing a fish the entire season. Now you're talking 3 times, you're talking over 20 days of competition and a meaningful fish. He could not remember losing a single meaningful fish all year.
I mean, I think that's I don't know that that's something that Ott did specifically. I think that has more to do with that's what leads to you winning a tournament. That's what leads to people winning Angler of the Year. You need all of those breaks to go your way. I mean, it's St. Lawrence River last year. I finished second to Cody Pike, and I talked to Cody Pike, in the weigh-in line, and I'm like, "So did you lose any?" And he's like, "No, I never lost one the entire event." And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I lost 5 fish, 1 fish every day and 2 fish one day, that had I landed any of those 5 fish, I would have won the event. And it's just like, I don't feel like there's anything I did that I mean, I was dealing with 5-pound smallmouth that were just going crazy, and it is what it is. But I just think he won the tournament because he fished clean. I didn't win because I lost 5 fish.
It's good stuff.
So,
there's no right answer.
Matt,
no wrong
you got to fish clean is what I'm saying. Stop
losing.
losing
It's
them.
easy to say that. The more you say that, then I think the more we might have to get Katie back on for the next quarter when you come on for the final quarter. Hopefully that went well with her. I know that she said she had a lot of interest from anglers. And I think she even did like a kind of an anglers only class following that.
Cool.
If you haven't listened to that, was 3 months ago. Katie Gruber it helped you with the mental side of fishing, and she was a
meditation coach.
Meditation coach, and just kind of some cool off the wall stuff that I like to talk about and get deep into it. When we get back, like I said, you did mention your YouTube channel. We're going to take our final break. You do a lot of stuff on tips, tactics. I want you to look back over the year and maybe give us some of the trends that you saw. Any new lures that kind of came to the forefront, anything unique that really caught your mind that you might have used or someone else used, but something that you think might be around in the future that kind of came to the forefront this year. If it's the Carolina rig, I'm kicking you off the show and we're ending it right away. So, all right.
I don't even know what that is.
Oh, I knew I liked you for a reason. BTL with Matt Stefan. We'll be back right after this. Have you considered purchasing new electronics for your rig? The type of mounts you choose to protect your investment should be part of the decision-making process. No matter if you prefer 1, 2, or 3 graphs up front, Beatdown Outdoors has a solution for you. Adjustable, versatile, rigid, and made in the USA. What's your ultimate electronic setup? Check out the full selection of Beatdown Outdoors products by visiting beatdownoutdoors.com.
The new Android series is the peak of the Denali lineup and offers the ultimate Denali experience. The Android series features 36-ton multi-directional graphite combined with interlock blank technology for added strength. Each rod is outfitted with Royal titanium guides that will not fail. The blank is fitted into an easy-touch, soft-feel EVA foam grip with exposed blank reel seat. This all allows the Android to transmit every movement of your bait and even the most subtle bites. The Android series is the finest rod Denali has ever made and offers an angler the ultimate fishing experience with a limited lifetime warranty. See the full lineup of Android rods at denalirods.com. Vibrating jigs are a great choice for any time of year, and the Kamikaze Swim-On is a perfect match for any vibrating jig. 2 sizes and the unique tail design gives it a bait fish profile and a great swimming action for realism. There are 17 colors. See them all at bigbitebaits.com.
The Spro Little John crankbait has been around for almost 15 years, and it is one of my go-to crankbaits whenever I need a fish in the boat, so you can never have enough new colors. That's why Spro's coming out with a handful of new colors, including Pearl Shad, which has this bleached out white look, but it's got this pearlescent, really, really pretty. We've got Copper Shad, which looks amazing in the water. It's got that purple flake on the back, really, really pops in the water. And then if you want some real pop, we've got Sparkle Shad, nothing but sparkles all over this thing. And then last but not least, we've got the matte Sexy Shad, just a really different looking color for a crankbait. So you want to give them a little different look, that matte Sexy Shad is definitely the one to go with. All these colors are available in the original Little John and the MD.
Combining one of the most popular hook styles with Gamakatsu's beefier Superline offering, the Gamakatsu Superline Offset Round Bend delivers the strength necessary to target big fish in heavy cover. Well suited for braided line and heavier fluorocarbon, the Gamakatsu Superline Offset Round Bend is built using stronger Superline wire that allows anglers to easily fish a finesse worm around heavy cover. The round bend offers a larger bite area, perfect for any worm presentation, while increasing your hookup ratios. The newly enhanced Z-bend holds your plastics on the hook longer, reducing the number of pull-offs and reducing damage to plastics. Available in 2/0, 3/0, 4/0, and 5/0, this is the most durable worm hook, designed for heavier lines that hold your bait on longer.
Preparation is key to success. And that preparation starts well before you ever hit the water. You're only as strong as your connection to the fish, and your line is that critical connection. Confidence in your line every minute of every day on the water is a necessity, and failure, it's not an option. Sunline makes the fluorocarbon, nylon, and braided lines to give you the strength to guarantee your confidence.
All right, wrapping up ETL with Matt Stefan. Noted YouTuber, but dude, you are always on top of everything as far as what's new, what's old, what's been working. The last one that caught my attention on your YouTube channel was the micro baits.
Yeah.
Are we headed towards an era of more natural, more micro baits, 3 to 5 pound test lines? Is that where we're headed to in the next couple years, in your opinion, in a lot of situations?
Yeah, I do. I think there's a big movement towards small baits, with ultra finesse presentations being something that you may actually start seeing in more tournaments. You've got that whole BFS, which is the bait finesse systems, like the really light bait casters that are starting to get a good stronghold in the market. But more than anything, I think it has to do with pressure. I mean, there's so much pressure on the waters these days that one of the best ways to get around pressured bodies of water is to use some very small baits. And I do think you're seeing that. A lot of companies coming out with lots of really small drop shot baits. I mean, stuff you'd consider crappie baits that, guys are using now for bass.
Second place in the opens, and I actually met him. He had no idea what I was saying, but he finished in the Northerns, is that Koya Fujita.
Yep.
And I was talking to some guys. That dude's like using like 3 and 5 pound test, and 4 pound test, and long casts, and tiny stuff, and absolutely insane what he's doing. He dominated. He just rolled in and went on pressured fisheries and caught him at Oneida and caught him at the Chesapeake. He caught him at the James, and he's on the Elite Series now.
I will battle until I die that the lighter the line, the smaller the baits, the lighter the presentation generates more bites. Now, you catch a lot of little fish, but you'll catch those big ones mixed in as well.
Anything else that you saw in this past year? We made it through the uni rig and all sorts of crazy stuff, but anything else that seemed to be trending in 2022?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's two things that I think you're going to see a lot of for next year. I think one, we're already seeing a big movement towards flat baits. So, the Japanese anglers are bringing over a lot of things like this that are meant to be more of your gliding baits. This is a Nori's flip Kogill. Then there's like the Depths bull flat. I mean, big bluegill style baits, but they're really meant to be like more of a gliding type technique. So I think that's something we'll see more of. And there's a technique called hover strolling that is phenomenal, and it's a light finesse presentation. And if you stay tuned, I mean, I might be coming out with a little certain something that will solve lots of the problems of hover strolling.
Yeah, that's a interesting one. I think there was one major tournament last year or this year. One of the guys was doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that guys up north have been doing for a long time. It's where you take a small plastic, you use a 90-degree jig head hook, and insert it slightly behind the head of the bait, and then put a nail weight in the front of the bait, and you get some pretty cool movement out of it. I've done lots of videos on it, but I've got something designed that will make that thing be awesome.
Okay, you also have a deal on the Depths Bowl, a 17-minute challenge and bait review on the Depths Bowl flat. That is, I was hoping you would mention that, because that is the most, we're seeing, I feel like Coda uses that a lot. Like, I remember looking at what he used at the James River, and I was like, what the heck is that? It's like basically a pancake made out of plastic is what it looks like. Giant. Yeah, it's big, and they're fishing it weird too, like 5 minutes a cast.
And like wacky rigging it, weightless wacky rigging a big chunk of plastic. I mean, all I'll say, like with that, so I had a viewer send me some baits, some depths bull flats. So I did that video using the baits they sent me, and they sent me 5 baits. I used all of them up in 17 minutes. And so like it was such good action and such fast action that I mean, I've ordered a pile more, but I can't even give you a full evaluation because I only used it for 17 minutes. They're really soft. So like I was ripping tails off and the bait was coming off, but
Alton Jr. was using something this year too that was similar to that. Bellows gill is another variation of that. Yep. Just bizarre looking stuff that is commonplace over in Japan right now, but is just outside the realm of comprehension over here.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of crazy stuff coming down the pipeline, and whether it ever goes mainstream or not, you'll never know. But, you know, it's hard to beat a wacky rig, right? Like a wacky rig catches fish. But I do think there's something to be said for baits and techniques that maybe the fish haven't seen before.
It's crazy. After all this, there are still baits and techniques that they haven't seen. I guess they haven't seen them because we haven't thought of them yet. But every number of years, something comes down the pipe.
Have you seen there's that hairy dice? Have you seen that? It's just a square with a bunch of tentacles used for drop shotting.
No.
Yeah. That's a pretty crazy one.
Is it that these things work, or that these fish will eat anything if you put it in the right area, and we're way overthinking this?
I'm starting to think they'll eat anything if it moves. It's all about your confidence, Matt. All about your confidence.
I hear you. Man, we covered a lot during this show. We got the business side. We got a little mental confidence side. We got some bait side in it. Anything else that you want to get in here?
You know, I guess the last thing I'd add is I'm starting to do a bunch of YouTube stuff with Fish the Moment. We've come up with a new channel where it's a bunch of anglers who are going to be given tips that are regionally based. The channel is called Bass Fishing Declassified, presented by Fish the Moment. So if there's viewers out there that want to get a good idea of kind of what's going on in their region, that would be worth checking out, because it's anglers like myself, Miles Berghoff, Kyle Cordiana, Johnny Schultz from Fish the Moment, Randy Blockett's going to be involved, Jimmy Easterling, who's the editor, is going to be doing some fishing. So we're all located in different parts of the country. In each video, you're going to get kind of a feel for what's going on throughout the country.
That's good stuff. I'm looking at it right now. Bass Fishing Declassified. Boy, Johnny has taken that market and just ran with it. It's incredible what he does. I love having him on BTL.
He's a very intelligent young man, and at the same time, he is truly an excellent fisherman.
I've known him since he was like 8.
Yeah.
He had like the Harry Potter glasses and the Triton jersey.
He probably still has that Triton jersey.
We bonded over casting kits.
That happened. Casting
it
kits
is.
Bring together.
Matt, Stefan, thanks for jumping on. Always informative, always entertaining, and informative starts with an E. Always entertaining, educational, and engaging. There's the 3 E's.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks.
All right, take care. This has been another episode of BTL. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.